All right. Helena, thank you for the music. That was great music to get us started. We got a lot of people registered tonight, so people are going to be joining intermittently, but we got a very, very packed agenda, so we're going to get started.
Bienvenido a todos, dice, estamos aquí, tenemos una agenda que bastante está empacada de muchas cosas, so vamos a ahorita empezar.
Hello and welcome to the first part of our Tenant Organizing Workshop series.
Dice, hola a todos y bienvenido a nuestra primera parte de la serie de lo que estamos haciendo el día de hoy.
My name is Tyrone Brown. I'm the statewide organizer. As the slide says, let's get to know each other and drop our name and location in the chat box.
Dice, mi nombre es Tyrone, dice, yo soy el que organiza, el que está organizando este taller, dice, y aquí como dice en la caja del chat, dice, podemos poner nuestros nombres y de dónde estamos viendo este taller.
We're gonna first start with some logistics. I'd like to introduce our staff member and our Spanish interpreter, Liana, to explain a few steps that all of us need to take to set up for interpretation prior to beginning.
So, entonces vamos a hacer unas cuantas cosas. Primero vamos a introducirnos. Yo les voy a introducir a todos los que están aquí en mi equipo y vamos a introducir al intérprete, Liana, que después les va a dejar saber de algunos pasos que tomar para poder llevar a cabo la interpretación.
Awesome. Thank you, Ty. Excuse me. Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Liana. My name is Jenny, and I'm one of the tech support people tonight. And I'm going to start by explaining how to use the interpretation feature on Zoom. And our interpreter, Liana, will repeat the instructions in Spanish as she's doing right now.
So, hola a todos, mi nombre es Jenny, yo soy una de las técnicas aquí que está trabajando en el técnico. Dice, ahorita vamos a introducirle los pasos de cómo y qué hacer cuando estamos en el canal de interpretación y Liana, la intérprete, lo va a interpretar en español como lo está haciendo.
Could you go to the next slide, Helena? Thank you. So we have 2 audio channels available tonight, English and Spanish. Everyone here will need to choose one of those channels, regardless of your language preference. I'm going to first explain how to choose the channels, then we'll start the interpretation and you'll choose your channel.
Sí, eso aquí, como aquí dice, indica, hay 2 canales de audio, dice, hay el inglés y el español, y todos tenemos que escoger un canal, ya sea en inglés o en español. Y entonces ahorita le vamos a poner la interpretación y le vamos a dar los pasos en cómo hacerlo.
So if you are joining from a computer, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see different icons and you'll want to click the one that looks like a globe. You might not see it yet because we haven't started interpretation. You will then, from the menu, you'll click the language that you want to hear, English or Spanish. And then if you want to mute the original audio, if you would like to only hear the Spanish interpreted, for example, if you're in the Spanish channel, you can click mute original audio.
So, entonces aquí como ella indica, dice, se puede conectar usando, ya sea depende si está usando una computadora, usted de una vez que se habite en la interpretación, usted puede hacer clic en el globo que va a salir. Dice, ya usted le va a presionar el globo y luego después de ahí va a seleccionar el idioma el que usted quiera escuchar, ya sea en el inglés o en el español. Y si acaso no quieren escuchar el audio original, lo cual es en inglés, para los que van a escoger el español, le pueden poner en mute para que así ya no puedan escuchar el audio original, lo cual es en inglés.
And if you are joining from the Zoom app on your phone, you'll look for the meeting controls at the bottom of your screen, and you'll tap the 3 dots, which is more, and then you'll click language interpretation. You'll select the language that you want to hear. And again, you can mute the original audio if you only want to hear the interpretation. Once you're done with that, you will click done. And I put these instructions in the chat, and I will also put a link to a document with the instructions in the chat.
So dice, so aquí también les indicamos si ustedes se metieron usando el Zoom, entonces lo que van a hacer, van a encontrar en la página, es unos controles donde van a tener 3 puntitos y luego ahí va a decir más, o sea, more en inglés, pero significa más. Y luego usted va a elegir el lenguaje de interpretación, así como indica language interpretation, pero eso significa interpretación del lenguaje. Y luego va a indicar el idioma que usted quiere escoger, ya sea el inglés o el español. Entonces, para no escuchar nuevamente el audio original, usted le va a poner en mute. Dice aquí en inglés, mi original audio, pero es el mute en el audio original. Y ya después usted le va a poner, le va a presionar donde dice DONE, lo cual significa que acabó. Ahorita aquí donde está el chat, van a ponerle un link para poder usted ver también, que ustedes vean cómo poder hacerlo y hacer un link donde les demuestra cómo llevar a cabo eso también.
Great, thank you. So now I'm going to start the interpretation and everyone will select English or Spanish.
So ya vamos a empezar. Y todos van a elegir inglés o español. Sorry, go ahead, yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, so now I will start the interpretation because we cannot hear Liana once she goes into the Spanish channel.
So ya vamos a empezar la interpretación para que los demás que quieran escuchar esto en inglés no me vayan a escuchar a mí interpretando todo en español. So ahorita a todas las personas que quieran escucharme para la interpretación de inglés a español, por favor, le van a poner en el español.
Tenemos una pregunta de Diego. Diego, do you have a question? Sorry, I saw the hand raised, so I wanted to see if they had a
No
question about
worries.
interpretation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Diego, if you're in the English channel and you can hear us, feel free to speak your question or put it in the chat. Everyone else, you should see the globe with that says interpretation, and you should be able to click that globe and then select a channel. John, do you see the globe icon on your Zoom controls at the bottom of your screen? Okay. Can you hear us right now, John?
There has never been any globe on my computer.
Okay. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah,
Okay. And is English your preferred language?
yes.
Okay. I think we'll be okay. I think you should still be able to hear us. The only thing you won't be able to hear is if someone in the Spanish channel speaks, but Liana is going to interpret when that happens. But let us know if the audio cuts out for you. I'm sorry that we're not sure how to address that in the moment. Okay, so everyone should be in a channel now, and now Liana is interpreting simultaneously in the Spanish channel. I did want to mention that for Spanish speakers in the Spanish channel, if there are times when you're wanting to speak so that everyone can hear, all you need to do is unmute yourself, and we should be able to hear you in the English channel as well. And then Liana will come in and interpret for you so that we can have that in English as well. Okay, Helena, would you mind going to the next slide? Thank you. Just a couple other logistics I wanted to go over. We also have live transcription tonight or closed captioning. Unfortunately, This is only offered in English right now. If you are on your computer, in your meeting controls at the bottom of the screen, you can click live transcript and then show subtitle. If you would not like to see the subtitles, you can use those same steps and select hide subtitle. You can also click view full transcript if you'd like to view the transcript on the side panel of your meeting. And then on the right side of the slide, if you are on your phone, you will tap the 3 dots, the more button again in your screen controls. You'll tap meeting settings, which is circled in yellow there. And then you'll toggle the button closed captioning to on or off, depending on your preference. And you also have an option there to view the full transcript by tapping the more button with the 3 dots. Next slide, please. And finally, just a reminder that if you are not speaking, please keep yourself unmuted, or sorry, please keep yourself muted. And if you would like to unmute to speak, if you have questions or if you're participating in the discussion, you can unmute yourself. I'm also going to put a link in the chat with some general instructions for using Zoom in case it's your first time, and let us know if you have any other questions. And I am going to pass it over to Julissa to share about our vision and commitment to language justice.
Gracias, Jenny. We understand that while we are providing interpretation between only 2 languages tonight, we must recognize that there are many languages present that are not being interpreted. Why do we try to create a multilingual space in our movement? And why is it important to center language justice? Because we know that the revolution is not happening only in English. Language justice includes the right for everyone to communicate in the language or languages in which they feel most comfortable, to understand and to be understood, and a commitment to creating bilingual or multilingual spaces where no language will dominate over other languages. It also includes a respect for the language rights of all people. Language justice means recognizing the fact that native languages have been almost eradicated as part of a systemic efforts of colonization and imperialism. In the Americas, Native American people and African people understand well how language means resistance. We all dream in different languages. Our hopes are designed in different languages. We create political projects in different languages. And so creating a multilingual space is not a job solely of the interpreters. It requires every one of us to contemplate what language justice means in our lives, our movements, and make it happen. Now I'm going to pass the mic over to Amber for the land acknowledgement. Thank you.
Thank you, Julissa. And so I'm Amber Abrahamson, and I want to acknowledge that we are on the occupied lands of the first peoples of what we call Washington State, Spokane, the Spokane, Caldwell Confederated Tribes, Palouse, Coeur d'Alene, Kalispell, and Kootenai, Olympia, Nisqually, Coast Salish, Cowlitz, Seattle, Duwamish, Muckleshoot, Tacoma, Puyallup, Yakima Central Washington, Yakima Nation, Cayuse, Walla Walla, and Wanapum. I also want to honor and acknowledge Indigenous peoples who live in all of the regions that we call North America, Central America, South America, the Pacific Islands, and Indigenous peoples around the world. We honor with gratitude the land itself and all of the Indigenous people who were first on this land and who are here still today. As we fight for housing justice on occupied lands, we must also fight for decolonization and meaningful solidarity with Indigenous peoples. Our collective liberation cannot happen without the sovereignty and resistance of our Indigenous relatives. Now I'm going to pass it over to Ty to go over our group agreements.
All right, thank you, Amber, Helena, and everyone who helped open us and grounded us in our language justice. We're going to be sharing space together for the next hour or so. So it's important to have some group agreements into place. A couple group agreements that we have right now are that we are going to respect others' experiences, to assume good intentions, because we're going to be covering so much, to be mindful of time and the space that you are taking up. We ask that you take risks and participate as you feel comfortable. Take care of yourself and your body during the workshop. And also one last reminder to please mute your mic when you are not speaking. These are some agreements that we are carrying over and hold true, but if there are anything we're missing, please add it in the chat on how you would like us all to show up together in this space. For muting, there should be a microphone button on the far left corner of your Zoom, and you could be able to click and unclick that as needed. And if anyone doesn't have anything else to add to our group agreements, I'm going to pass it on over to Terry for a very brief introduction to the TU.
Hi, everybody. I'm Terry Anderson. I'm in Spokane, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Tenants Union. The Tenants Union was formed in 1977 when the city of Seattle was going to pass an ordinance that would eliminate single-room occupancy housing in downtown Seattle. That was a time, if you can think back, where there was a lot of development and developers wanted to change Seattle and make it more profitable. So they were able to convince city council that single room occupancy caused a blight. The problem was they never talked with the tenants. So the tenants in downtown Seattle organized and stopped that ordinance from passing, and single room occupancy remains a viable option for affordable housing in Seattle today. The Tenants Union was formed when those tenants, when they organized, and within 3 years, Seattle enacted Washington's first just cause eviction ordinance, and the tenants in Seattle were on the move. Within 1 year, landlords went to the state legislature and got a state law prohibiting cities and counties in Washington from passing rent control. So that is kind of what started us, and that we continue to grow and move and change policies. The mission statement of the Tenants Union is, the mission of the Tenants Union is to create housing justice through empowerment-based education, outreach, leadership development, organizing, and advocacy. Founded in 1977, the Tenants Union carries on a proud legacy of work to create concrete improvements in tenants' living conditions and challenge and transform unjust housing policies and practices. As a membership organization, the TU's work is grounded in the strong conviction that tenants must be the leaders of efforts to transform our housing conditions and communities. The TU embraces the values of equality, hope, tenant leadership, respect, direct action, civic courage, racial and economic justice, and self-determination in our work. Our Spokane office opened in 2013, where our focus was mainly on housing preservation in HUD Section 8 buildings. We quickly learned that tenants in Spokane needed the Tenants Union, so we opened a permanent office in Spokane in 2013. You've already met Ty Brown, who is our statewide organizer, and he works from Olympia. We are currently organizing Tacoma tenants and are working together with the city of Tacoma to adopt tenant protections. So we are truly a statewide organization. To learn more about our work in this past year, please take a look at our beautiful annual report and that we are sharing in the links. And it will tell you all the things that we've done in the past year. We will be celebrating our 45th birthday this year, and we're holding celebrations in Burien on August 2nd and in Tacoma and Spokane on September 15th. We hope you will all join us at our celebration. Now I'll pass the mic back to Ty.
All right, all right. And thank you everybody for bearing with us at the beginning of this workshop, getting everything set up. So once again, welcome to the workshop. My name is Ty Brown, if you haven't caught that yet. And we're just very happy to be providing this workshop and building community with you all. In this workshop, we're going to be going over and covering how to organize. We'll be going over the basics of building-based tenant organizing, the importance of it, barriers, as well as step-by-step guides on how to engage your neighbors. We're going to be having some group discussions, some breakout rooms, and this workshop is going to be packed full of information. So I encourage you all to take notes, write down your questions on your notepads so that we can answer them towards the end. And also encourage you to use the chat box. We're going to be recording this meeting so that we can send it out to all the registrants afterwards. And also, I just want to give you a quick reminder that it's not too late to invite a friend or a neighbor, because organizing is all about building community and people power. So Amber's going to open us up with some tenant organizing basics.
Thank you, Ty. We'd like to start off with a group discussion to ground us in why it is important for tenants to come together to organize in their buildings. So please feel free to share your thoughts in the chat or unmute yourself if you'd like to share out loud. If you are in the Spanish channel, Liana can interpret for you. If you type in the chat or ask a question out loud, we will be recording some of your responses using the whiteboards feature on Zoom. And we can send you a copy of your responses after the workshop. If there are responses in the chat we don't get to during this time, we'll add them to the whiteboard afterward. Okay, and so we are going to discuss, to start, what comes to mind. So when something comes to mind when you hear the term, what comes to mind when you hear the term building-based organizing? What do you think building-based organizing is? Don't be shy. Anybody? Chat? All right, Michelle, organizing based, talking to other tenants, connected housing units coming together. Let me go to the chat. Okay, coming together. It sounds like a more intimate organization with direct neighbors who have the same landlord. All right, great job, everyone. So these are all correct. Building-based organizing is generally made up of tenants who live in the same building or have the same landlord. It's led by tenants and renters themselves who are fighting for their collective interests and rights. Tenants organize and build relationships with their neighbors and those who share the same problem, working together to maximize their impact. When we go door knocking and build one-on-one relationships, we talk about experiences with those impacted. And it's going to be a lot of 80% listening and 20% talking. And some of the building-based organizing activities can include door knocking, one-on-one relationships, flyering, meetings, direct actions, social media, letter campaigns, contacting news, the media. Okay. This one is going to be second question. What might motivate people to come on, let's hear some voices out there.
Amber, I think there's a little interference with the audio. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. What might motivate people to organize in their buildings? Question 2.
Unfortunately, hardship.
Yes. Bad conditions.
Harassment by the management company.
Yes. Community. Problems that aren't being resolved. Food. That's correct. Violation of laws that are designed to protect tenants that no one seems to care about.
And safety for your family.
Yes.
Yeah, safety issues are big.
Go ahead. So those are all great answers. And your landlord has done something that negatively impacts you and your neighbors, such as rent increases, rule changes, or refusing to do repairs. You're afraid your landlord might do something that would negatively impact you and your neighbors, such as a rent increase, or you anticipate your landlord may try to sell your building or implement rent increases. You want to increase communication between your landlord and your community. Great. And you want to organize your building to strengthen protections for tenants and fight for rent stabilization in Washington state. And we're going to go on to question 3. Why do you think tenant organizing is important?
Another
Shout 'em out.
unfortunate, because if you don't have someone to support you, then no one will pay any attention to your issues.
Thank you. If we don't stand up for ourselves, no one else will. Equality. Stronger together.
So I got something, I'm sorry, this is Anna. I got something in Spanish. So the union is the force.
Yes, great, well said. Renter rights. United voices is easier heard. Stronger together.
Also, a bad situation can also come people together.
Yes, it does. Thank you, everyone. Those are all great answers. Greater numbers of tenants gives us more power. Thank you, everyone. So that brings us on to benefits of being organized. So we've discussed what tenant organizing is and why it's powerful and some of the basics. Now we're going to discuss some of the benefits of organizing together. And so building-based organizing creates community, collective power. When building collective power, we must organize because overcoming our fears is impossible alone. We must organize to overcome fear and transform that fear into dignity and solidarity. We do this for our homes, communities, and on a statewide level. Well-organized tenants can win by being organized, by making bold demands to collective ownerships of buildings. If our politicians do not pass meaningful protections, we must protect ourselves. Organized tenants can achieve better living conditions for themselves and their neighbors. The power of the collective. Organized tenants can work for protections that are not covered by the law. For example, resisting rent increases. Organized tenants make themselves and their issues more visible, heard. Organizing tenants gives people a place to voice their concerns where they can be heard without fear of retaliation. Organized tenants can build a sense of community in the building for tenants and residents in the neighborhood. Organized tenants can work with other tenant associations to create better conditions for all tenants in Seattle, in Washington, and across the country. Are we missing anything? What do you feel are some more of benefits of being organized? Bullying from the management.
So others can know that you need help.
Yes, you're not alone.
I'm sorry. So others can find ways to get help when they need it.
Knowing that somebody's backing you up. It would be
Somebody
nice.
said in Spanish, thank you, everyone.
It would be nice if we could help offset the power imbalance. It's not sustainable to do it alone. No, and it's really hard. We've already done that. We stand a chance of getting laws changed to help protect us and others like us. Yes. Any more? Thank you, everyone. These are great answers, and they're all correct of why we're here today. And so thank you for joining today. And I'm going to pass it on to Tyrone.
Thank you, Amber. And thank you, everyone, for your answers. As you can see, there are many, many reasons as to why we might organize, and many, many reasons as to why we might come together to organize. And one of the biggest things that I'm seeing in the chat and answers is just knowing that we're not alone in building collective community power. So this is another reminder, as this is a chance to network and connect with people in your community and across the state. So look at who's in the room and don't be afraid to connect, because we're all here for the same reason. So Amber explained what being organized looked like, why it's beneficial to be organized, and how organizing makes us stronger. We're going to pass the mic to Jalissa, who's going to go into leading us into the barriers to organizing and how to organize equitably.
Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Amber. And thank you, everyone, for all of your energy tonight and all of your answers. I want to ask you all to think for a second about what do you believe could be a barrier to tenant organizing? And you can put it in the chat or you can say it out loud. Burnout for sure.
Landlord retaliation.
Loss of housing, retaliation, immigration status. Landlords having more money and resources to fight us, speaking a different language. Absolutely. Wow, you guys are on fire.
Afraid of being deported. Yes, I'm sure you could
Many
probably say
people afraid of being deported. Yes.
Not knowing your neighbors.
Not knowing your neighbors. Yes, absolutely. Many times simply choose to move rather than fight the barriers with predatory management and problem with neighbors. Absolutely. These are things we see every day.
Don't want to conflict.
Yeah, lack of federal protections, your neighbors having different values. Absolutely.
Lack of enforcing your tenant rights.
People being unaware of their rights, worries about public perception, especially it could potentially affect your livelihood, your job. Absolutely.
I'm
And
sorry.
isolation.
Fear of retaliation. Absolutely. Wow.
Liana, was there someone in the Spanish channel?
No, I think there was somebody in English, but I don't think we were able to hear her.
Oh,
Difficulties with compromise on solutions, isolation. Yes, absolutely. So all of these ideas and barriers that you all came up with tonight, you know, are good things to keep in mind as we start to organize our building.
¿Cierto?
Oh, excuse me?
So there's another one in Spanish. They're just saying not knowing your rights as tenants.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So as we organize, it's important to create a plan and strategy that is equitable to all our neighbors and tenants. We must consider the intersections of race, immigration status, language, accessibility to technology, and what risks and vulnerabilities of some tenants may have. It is not uncommon for retaliation to happen when tenants organize in their building. However, the best way that you're going to be able to protect yourself from retaliation is going to be unity and well-documented communication. Please do not communicate with your landlord or your management by any verbal communication or going down to the office to see them. I know that that is sometimes the most practical thing to do. I know that is sometimes we think of it as the most efficient thing to do, but we cannot have that conversation well documented, and please do not sign any documents unless you have read through them and know what it is that you are signing. And how can we account for the barriers while continuing to organize? Well, we need to focus on protecting and being accountable to those most impacted by the systems of housing. Consider what you and your tenant association can do to support your neighbors. How can you all protect each other? What support do you need to keep each other safe as possible? How to be informed and inform everyone of the risks that might be involved in different parts of organizing. Be accountable and center the needs and solutions of those who are most impacted. A question that is posted all the time in organizing is, can you be evicted? In the times before Just Cause, which is an eviction protection, tenants could, outside of the city of Seattle, could receive a 20-day notice, an eviction notice to move in retaliation for organizing. However, now that Just Cause has passed in the entire state of Washington, you are protected from retaliation and from eviction because of Just Cause, excuse me. And HUD buildings have always had protections in organizing. You cannot get evicted for organizing. They would try to intimidate you, possibly. They would try to do some retaliation tactics, but that's why you're going to be really, really diligent about documenting all the communication. As we're talking about barriers, we're going to talk about why race matters in everything, and going further into our intersectionality and organizing. Well, race matters in housing because of the history of colonization and land ownership. As John Trudell once said, how can we own our mother? And due to old redlining laws and current systems and lack of policy, it is imperative to continue to keep intersections of discrimination within housing barriers, keeping BIPOC and immigrant tenants from accessing housing and tenants' rights. Ultimately, we must all practice prioritizing the leadership of Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities and others systematically excluded from land ownership. We must also keep in mind that Indigenous people were not legally allowed to live in the city of Seattle until the 1970s. We must center our most vulnerable communities, our undocumented folks. We must also take into account the history of Chicanos that is tied to the land and identity as the border moved. In Washington and across the country, this global health pandemic has highlighted the role of systemic racism, especially as it relates to housing instability. For example, the undocumented community were not able to access funds from the stimulus package to pay their rents or sustain themselves during these unprecedented times. Renters with disabilities, and particularly disabled Black, Indigenous, and people of color, have also been significantly impacted by the intersections of ableism and racism. We know by that one study that estimates that 1 in 6 Black adults in Pierce County and 1 in 11 Black adults in King County were named in an eviction filing between 2013 and 2017. So let's keep that in mind as we continue to move forward in organizing our buildings and organizing our homes and organizing our cities and organizing our country. Now I'm going to pass it back to Tyrone, to introduce the next section of our workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph, for that very, very important segment right there. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge all the questions coming into the chat. We see them, we have someone writing them down, and we're going to have a portion in the end to go over questions and things like that. But just to move us forward a little bit, because we do have so much more to cover. We are going to move into starting learning about some basic skills for organizing and building power together. Lydia is going to give us a little bit of an overview and start us out about talking about some various tactics we can use to get folks involved.
Excuse me, before you move forward, could you explain what she meant by named in something she says?
I think Julissa was saying named in an eviction case. Is that what you were
Yes.
saying? Do you mean explain what that means?
Yeah, because I don't know if everybody would understand how she said it. It wasn't like you said it. She just said named in some filing, but thoroughly.
Right. Julissa, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you. Basically named like their names were in a filing, an eviction summons, an eviction filing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Lydia, you want to lead us into the next section?
For sure. Thanks, Ty, and thanks for the question. That's a good reminder to sometimes re-clarify what we're talking about. A lot of things are jargon in housing, and that's one of the ways they get you, or they try to. So y'all know we've been over, you all brought in a lot of answers to why organizing is so important for actually making community-centered solutions possible. Now we're going to dig into how to actually organize in your building. One of the first things I just want to highlight is it can be incredibly helpful to look at what other people have already done or are doing and get advice from other tenants who've organized. So some folks here might have, some folks here might not have, but this would be a good networking space to talk to other folks who are doing it, or other community organizers who are doing work in your area and you know them or you trust them, or always calling the tenants union. Honestly, getting connected to people doing organizing is one of the best ways to really build your network of support as you start on the building-based organizing work you're doing. Speaking of, developing a tenant group in your building looks incredibly different depending on the context of your building. I think some of them were mentioned when we were talking about barriers, but like dynamics and values of folks who are in the building, and issues that you are personally dealing with in your building. I really just want to go over this brief overview. That's what's on the screen right now, is a very brief overview that highlights some of the important pieces and steps in a general order of how you can go about starting your organizing efforts. We know that if starting by identifying common issues that you or other folks are having is a good way to figure out what information you might need. Getting to know your rights as a tenant is a great way to learn and be able to share about why it's so important we work together to make things different, and also maybe even brings up some issues that lead to actions, because you're hearing about, you know, new rights that you have that are being violated that you can work together to try and push for. Speaking of know your rights, you can get that information from a lot of different places. We know our website, the Tenants Union website, has a lot of information and sample letters and frequently asked questions that you can refer to, as well as Washington law help. I believe those are going to be put in the chat. And so as you get to know your rights, that's just an important piece for you to be able to bring to the table, and for you to also take on for yourself to know when your rights are being violated and where to go to resolve those. One of the most, I think, important pieces is that piece of talking to your neighbors. One of the most valuable things you can do is figure out what's going on with your neighbors, really build relationships and that safety network. I think someone said creating a safe space is what organizing is. And I think that is so beautifully framed, because talking to your neighbors is the first way to build that safety network of people who care about each other and care about what's going on in your building. You also want to get to know what's going on in your building, who owns it, who's managing it, if they own other properties, maybe even look up their code violations or what's going on. Are they selling it? You know, you can get a lot of information on the internet about what's going on with your building that can give you some tools to talk about what issues you might be dealing with, and also what solutions might come up based on that research. And maybe even other tenants you want to organize with across buildings. Oftentimes holding tenant meetings and setting group goals and shared values is a great way of really knitting together what issues you're finding and you're hearing about, and also giving people a space to really meet and share, as well as intentionally coming up with a very democratic, or at the very least a very shared structure that centers the voices of those most impacted by housing issues, and also coming to solutions and having the decision-making processes clear to everyone who's participating in the tenant organizing. It's a great way to also resolve conflicts that come up, because the spaces, as democratic as they can be, can really bring about a lot of different issues or values issues. But if you can center everyone on certain agreements, it's a great way to really have shared values across certain differences, depending on what those are, right? And last but not least, getting involved in the greater community is one of the best ways to keep the ball rolling and also build your power, so that it looks like a lot of different things depending on what you're fighting for, but finding the continuity between what you're doing in your building and also hearing what's going on in the community that you're living in, and also maybe some other buildings or some housing issues that are coming up in your region that you might be able to advocate for. That's all really important, and what coming together to intentionally organize together can do. I also saw a hand raised, and I don't want to keep going, but that's just the gist of the overview. And I think we're going to dig deeper, and I'm going to pass the mic to Terry, unless that question comes back up. Terry's going to go over, as I said, one of the most important parts, and I think everyone here has said it, talking to your neighbors, getting folks involved. It starts with the conversations. And I think Terry's going to talk about how to strategically and intentionally build your organizing efforts.
Okay, as I scroll down to the section I am at, thank you guys. And now you've heard about the importance of organizing, what the benefits are. You've talked about some barriers, and now you want to get started. What's the first thing you want to do? Well, the first thing that you do is you're going to be building relationships with the tenants in your building. And relationship building always starts with one really good conversation. And so the first thing that you're going to want to do is to talk to the tenants that are in your building. And I want to remind everybody right now, pay a little close attention, because after I'm done here, you're going to go into breakout sessions and you're going to practice a door knocking rap with each other. I'm going to briefly go over the elements of that conversation, but of course you're not going to be expected to, have everything, because I'm not sure I have everything written down for you, but we will be sending out a handout with key elements for your conversation after this workshop. So that you'll have that in writing. And before you go out knocking on the doors, whether you do it by yourself or maybe there's just a core group of folks in your building that want to first get together, and you want to develop your rap, which we call it a rap for no other reason that's what I've always called it. And it's a short script for your door knocking outreach. It should be short, sweet, and to the point. So the basic elements of your rap and your organizing conversation: number one, you want to introduce yourself and ask if you can come in and talk. You can talk at the door at the hall, but you will find quickly that they're going to probably invite you in, because you're going to be talking about some really cool stuff. So once you do that, ask open-ended questions to find out what other tenants' concerns and major issues in the building. And then you want to agitate on those issues. Then you make a plan to win by forming a tenant association. Then you ask tenants to commit to join or take some action. And this part's really important. You're always going to want to inoculate the tenants against landlord tactics and responses. So, and I'll go over that a little bit now, but that inoculation piece is kind of important. Then you want to agree on how you will follow up. And that's the end of your conversation. So some of the tips for yourself to know: you want to listen more than you talk. So we always kind of set a goal to listen 80% of the conversation and talk 20% of the conversation. Never make assumptions or judgments based on appearance, language, or any outward factors. Always be respectful. Remember, you are meeting the tenants where they are at in their homes. You can take notes, but sometimes tenants get a little nervous when you're taking notes, so you want to reassure them that those are not going anywhere but for your own information. And you should have your questions prepared ahead of time. Please avoid yes or no questions, because all you're going to get is a one-word answer. Make sure your questions are open-ended and that they flush out the tenant's greatest concerns and issues. So here are some sample questions. What has your experience been like living in this building? How long have you lived here? What do you like about the building? What don't you like? You may also ask, what happens when you assert your rights or ask the landlord for something you want? How did that go? Let them talk about those experiences. What are some of the things your landlord says or does to you and to other tenants in the building? How does that make you feel? What do other tenants in the building tell you? What would you like to see happen in your building? How would you like to see changes around here? What would things look like in this building if things were changed? And then explain how a tenant association in the building can solve many of those issues in which they're talking about, and they will create solidarity amongst tenants. So agitation, I don't have to tell any of you, is going to be very, very easy because many of the issues that tenants face in their buildings they're already agitated. But I want to remind everybody that your laundry will never get clean without the agitation cycle on your washing machine. So it's really important that you get this out because that's how you clear the air. So this is the part of the conversation when you get tenants to focus on the injustice and imbalance of power of the tenant-landlord relationship, and that will motivate them to take action or to join a movement. Ask them about the specific concerns they've told you about, whether it be rent increases, failure to have repairs made, or any other issues. And use questions like, how did that make you feel? Or do you think that is fair? If they say they don't think it is fair, ask them to explain why they don't think that is fair. Allow them to elaborate and talk as long as they want and give them the space to develop their thoughts and feelings. You may also tell them what others in the building have told you and what other frustrations and concerns. So now we get to the ask. It's always important to have an ask. It's something that you are asking the tenant to do at the initial conversation. And it's always a doable ask. The ask is a way to get the tenant engaged and gauge their level of interest. If they do what you ask of them, that's a pretty good indication they want to get involved. So the ask could be something like, can we talk more? Do you have time for an hour to get a cup of coffee? Could you invite another tenant in the building to join? Or another ask would be, would you come to a meeting with other tenants in the building? And if there's already a meeting scheduled, hand them a flyer. Would they be willing to host a meeting in their unit in the future? Will they be willing to invite at least one other tenant in the building to come? Are you willing to post a flyer on your door or hand them to other tenants? Will you sign a petition? If you have a letter writing campaign, would you be willing to sign a letter? Will they be willing to talk to their neighbor next door? So don't forget, another part of your conversation is to collect some information. So don't forget to record the information that you've got. It's important to get their name, the unit number if you're in the building, what apartment number they're in, contact information of everybody that you talk to. It's important to keep track of any important pieces of information that might come out of your conversation. You can also track how interested they seem to be in supporting an organizing effort. So that you know what to prioritize. Inoculation. This is kind of an important piece because if you all know what an inoculation, it's not quite like a vaccination, although a vaccination can be an inoculation. It's when you are actually given a little piece of the virus that's infecting you so that your immunities can build up. That's what it's in a medical term. For an organizing term, it's when tenants take action, they should expect that the landlord or the property management will fight back. So the tactics will vary widely depending on whether they're trying to scare, confuse, deflate, or divide the tenants in the building. You should prepare the tenants for whatever the landlord might do. For that, it's best to use a method called inoculation. Ask them to predict how a landlord will react to the tenants forming an association in the building. This is actually really important when you're doing it at your first tenant association meeting, because then you can popcorn that question and tenants will build off of each other's answers. But this is also important on a one-on-one to get the tenant thinking that there may be some obstacles, but that's not going to throw you off base. And that's why you want to do this inoculation piece. By having tenants think about their landlord's responses, they're not surprised or disappointed when it actually happens. Now, I'm going to pass it over to Amber and Julissa, who will demonstrate a good organizing conversation for us and give everybody the opportunity to practice one-on-one in your breakout rooms. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry.
Amber, I think you're muted.
Sorry, everyone. Thank you, Terry. That was great information. Okay, everybody, we're going to be doing some role playing, and me and Jaleesa are going to do a door knock. And so I'd like to remind everybody, please pay attention. After I'm done talking, or we're done talking, you're going to go into breakout rooms and practice what we're demonstrating for you. The context is that you have already talked with some neighbors and community members and tentatively set a time to have a building meeting. Your building is about 30 units. Okay.
Hi.
Hello, my name is Amber and I'm a tenant here in Cool Blue Apartments. I'm talking to tenants about issues they're having with our building. Do you have a few minutes to talk?
Yeah, of course.
Great, thanks for taking the time. What are some of the issues you've been having?
Well, beyond the repairs that are not being made, I just received a $200 rental increase, and that has me really nervous because my income is not increasing.
That's awful. And I'm so sorry. We deserve better than that. I know I recently received a notice for $200 rent increase, and I know a lot of other folks in the building have received similar notices. Some other neighbors are interested in getting together to talk about how this notice and other housing issues are impacting us and what we as tenants can do to get our needs met. Would you be interested in coming to a building-wide meeting next Thursday at 7 p.m.?
Yeah, I think I'm available next Thursday at 7 p.m. Thank you, Amber. Is there anything I can help you with?
Well, I'm so glad you're interested. It would be amazing. If you could help us door knock on some of the neighbors' doors and invite them to join us at the meeting, is there a day that would work for you?
Perhaps we can do that on Tuesday around 6 p.m.
Awesome. I can take down your phone number and contact information and share mine with you so we can stay connected, and I'll see you on Tuesday. And maybe by then, if not, maybe you can at least try to reach out to one other neighbor on their floor or that you may be familiar with here in the building.
I would definitely do that. I will reach out to the Spanish speaking tenants in the building. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, everyone. So we're going to have you develop your own rap and apply it to the circumstances in your building.
All right. Thank you, Amber and Jalissa, for that wonderful role playing on organizing and one-on-one conversations and door knocking. So what we're going to do now, now it's you guys' turn. We're going to break out into breakout groups using the content that Terry gave to us in the example that Jalissa and Amber gave to us. We're going to be putting a one-on-one script on the screen. And we will also include that in the chat. Oh, I see Lydia says, does anyone have any questions before we jump into the breakout rooms? All right, so if you do have questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll address them. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna break out into groups. And I think we're gonna break out into a group of 2 with about 2 minutes each so that we could practice a back and forth one-on-one. We'll send a message to you all when 2 minutes have passed so that you know when to switch roles. And then when the time is up, you'll automatically rejoin the main room. I suggest that you have fun with it because not every single door knocking one-on-one conversation is going to go the same. You're going to have people who are willing to be a part of the movement. You're going to have people who are not ready to be there yet, right? So I suggest you take on maybe the role of someone who might, who's willing to join immediately, and then someone who was not. So definitely just have fun with it. And then if you prefer to speak Spanish, please do not accept the breakout room invitation and just remain in the main room so that we could put you into another breakout room with our interpreter.
Hey, Tyrone, while you're here, I just got a quick question.
Yes, I broke out of the room quick. I'm sorry. I just left the room without no warning. I'm sorry.
So this is Nancy and Becky. Becky
Hi,
Hayes.
Becky. Hey guys, good to see you.
So one of the big things that we're having an issue with is the managers are pitting us against each other.
Oh, wow.
How do we fix that?
No estábamos en plena conversación.
Have your landlord talk to both of you at the same time. Make sure that he can't separate you. That's why we're having a tenant association. So, because we do know landlords try to divide tenants. And so rather than meeting with the the landlord individually, you can, as a tenant association, ask the landlord to meet with you. That changes the dynamics of a meeting, and it makes the landlord go into your space rather than forcing you go into the landlord space. And you will be together and collective, and you will have all of the people in the room, the very same people that landlord may have been trying to divide, and that will usually stop that division.
Yeah, because our manager won't let us like meet, like have somebody else in the room with us.
When she's talking to us.
Well, that's there's no law that allows a landlord to do that, so you do not have to comply. You can say you're bringing somebody. If they try to evict you for it, I do not see where they would have any legal grounds to evict you.
Okay.
And if they were to retaliate, you would want to get a hold of us, and we could also talk to you about that. But just because a landlord says he wants you to do something, you are under no obligation to do what that landlord wants you to do. And if you want to meet on your terms, you have every right to do that.
Okay.
And you can always organize a meeting or schedule a meeting and not let them know that someone's coming until the meeting is started. And then you say, oh, by the way, I've also invited my neighbor.
Yeah. Okay.
Or I've actually had tenants bring us to the meetings or invite attorneys from Northwest Justice Project. So you are free to invite whoever you want to come to those meetings.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Terry, and thank you for your questions for sure. We are at 52 after, so we're gonna kind of rush in. The breakout rooms took a little bit more time than we anticipated with the tech support and everything. I just want to give one quick moment to see and offer space for like anyone to jump in the chat box, let us know what came up for you, any questions you might have around that, because we all know one-on-one conversations can be scary. The most important thing that I can stress on one-on-ones is practice, practice, practice. Whether you practice with your neighbor, your family, whoever it is to practice with, practice is very, very important. And then, you know, once you get out and about, as we're having in these conversations, you start to notice that we all kind of share the same common issues. Might not be the same landlord, might not be the same building, but as renters in Washington State, we share the same issues. So that's just one thing to keep in mind when you're knocking on doors, is that like, sometimes it feels like we're the only ones out here, but the more and more you door knock, the more and more you see how connected we are in community based off of these violations in housing rights. So I'm gonna pass it to Jaleesa, who's quickly gonna go over into holding your first meeting.
Thank you, Ty. Well, as you have practiced your one-on-one meetings, when you are getting ready to host and hold your first meeting, it is important that you all talk about your common values and community agreements. and take time to learn because knowledge is power. So as a reminder, we are here to protect each other and our housing rights, not to do the landlord's job of targeting and ruining people's access to
Sorry,
home.
Julissa, sorry, this is Liana. There's, I guess we forgot to remind the people that came back for the Spanish speaking that they have to again select Spanish because there's a question in here. Because they are in the English channel, not Spanish channel. So aquí si hay alguna persona que habla español, por favor, agarre el en español.
On how to stay organized as a tenant group, which you were doing earlier.
Oh, yeah, and we have very little time. So what I want to say about this is in order to
sorry, Terry, I'm so sorry. I think there's a little bit of overlap with the interpreter. Liana, would you mind sharing that in Spanish again, the instructions for rejoining the Spanish channel?
Yes. So todos los que llegaron para atrás de ahí de los cuartos van a tener ahí la elección de español. Elijan el español para que me puedan escuchar a mí nuevamente, porque si están en inglés, muévanse para atrás en español para que me vuelvan a escuchar a mí. Gracias. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Liana. Sorry, Terry, back to you.
Okay, I'm sorry. And I'm seeing we have very short time. So the best way to stay organized is to keep your tenant organization intact. And you can do that several ways on how you develop your leadership structure. And always the only tenant organizations that the tenants union will work with and work with is that you have to be democratic, meaning that every member of the building has a vote. This is not, we do not organize tenant associations to pit one group of tenants against another group of tenants, or tenants in building A against tenants in building B. You are to remain solid. That is how your organization will stay intact. Now, you may have different ways you want to develop your leadership structure. You can be traditional with the president, vice president, and so on. You can have group leadership, but it all has to be democratically decided upon, and that everybody has a role to play. And then everybody can decide what their roles are. And we would like you to stay organized because we hold renters assembly. And of course, due to COVID, we haven't had one since I think 2019. But we will have another one when we are safe to do it. And if you will all keep us informed about your tenant organization, we're actually in the process of finding a way to keep you intact using our website. And because we want to invite you all to come to our rental assemblies, and you can formalize your group any way in which you want to. So I'll move on to Lydia.
Thanks, Terry. I also appreciate everyone taking the time to talk to one another. I'm seeing some questions in the chat, which actually pair really well with what I'm going to remind people of, which is that this has covered a portion of our how to organize conversation, or how to organize workshop. The second part of the workshop will be next week on June 2nd, where we will talk about deciding on demands and as a building or as a community, and building out those demands, the tactics to get your demands met. So I saw some questions or concerns in the chat that we should we'll bring that back next week, those questions about, for example, a rent strike. So we'll definitely talk about tactics next week. Organizing in your community, so also organizing for larger community change. I was seeing in the chat another comment, which was how to build a tenants union for a whole city or town instead of a specific building. So we're going to talk about what it is to like spread and base build broader. And I think in the chat, Jenny has put the June 2nd, which is next Thursday at 6:30 workshop there. Registration, as well as the membership form. The membership form for folks who are interested or who are already organizing, it's a great way to stay plugged in to be a member. We shifted our membership to be about how you want to engage and building our base. So it's not about dues paying, it's about how we want to show up for each other. There's a great question on there that is about if you're already organizing. So feel free to check that, and Ty, our statewide organizer, will be in touch. With that, I will go ahead and pass the mic to Julissa to close us out.
Thank you. Once again, gracias. Thank you for being here and bringing your power. It is truly collective power that fuels the revolution. Our hope is that you can take this knowledge to your communities, start organizing your buildings to grow state tenant power. This means talking to your neighbors, thinking of what impacts you, envisioning, and, you know, in the history of the world, legislators have never given us our rights. We have always fought for our rights. So creating tenant power and solidarity is how we are going to create policies to protect and enforce your rights as tenants. And as we were talking earlier about barriers, and as we were talking now about tenant power, this picture that we see here is from our rent control rally a few years back. And it's so powerful because it was a community of South Park. Most of them were Latinx. And we were able to provide the transportation, and we were able to provide food, and we were able to provide the needs that a lot of the people of the Latinx community do not have. We were able to remove those barriers that prevent a lot of the Latinx community from organizing and from going to Olympia to fight for their rights as tenants. Lastly, there is the invitation to register to our 45th anniversary celebration that is taking place in Burien on August 2nd and in Tacoma and Spokane on September 15th. It's going to be a big fiesta, and I would know because I am co-organizing it, and I'm very extra. Please join us to celebrate our housing justice and tenant power. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liana, for interpreting this entire hour and a half.
Oh, and one more thing. Do not forget to register for the next workshop next Thursday, please, because we're going to be talking about connecting all of the building-based organizing to pushing legislation and organizing statewide.
Yes, and I just put the link in the chat again, and we'll send out a follow-up email with slides and links from this meeting, including the link to register for next week's workshop in case you don't have a chance tonight, but do it tonight if you can.
And I challenge you to bring a friend, because we're going to need a lot of power to get this in our state.
It's blurred out, but it says rent control for those who are curious. There we go. Oh, yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you, everyone.
There, we can see it when it's like that, Amber.
Yeah.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you. No thunderstorm.